Hi everyone and welcome to 20 the Tinker. This week we are down in the very far south of Namadgi National Park, right near the New South Wales border. And down here there's a thing called the Settlers Track, which is a track between 3 homesteads and huts. And I'm going to give you a bit of a tour of those and show you some of the tools that we use to make them. We're starting today down here at Brayshaw's homestead and then riding along the Settlers Track up to Waterhole Hut, and then down to Westerman's homestead and back again. Now we're at the hut, time for the important stuff. Not all huts have water. Have tanks, and they're not always full, but this is full, and let's find out if the water's any good. I am going to be boiling this, so hopefully it'll be okay. Oh, it's coming out with some pretty colours. Let's have another go. There must have been something in the pipe, bit of rust. Yeah, that's better. That looks pretty good. Of course, it can still have all sorts of bacteria and all sorts of stuff in it. So, I'm going to boil it. We'll make a cup of tea. That'd be good. While the pot's boiling, let's have a look around the inside of the hut. Down one end, we've got a stone fireplace, and there's a chimney above that. There's a big bit of corrugated sheet metal across the top, and that's just to help the chimney draw properly and stop the hut getting smoky. Come around this side and we've got a couple of shelves and things and some artifacts down there, and we'll have a look at those in just a second. Coming around here, a few more artifacts on the wall, a few more notices. We've got an old bed. Can you imagine sleeping in this hut with a dirt floor and that for a bed? That would have been rough. There's a fire extinguisher over here. Modern addition, but very much necessary because these huts burn down from time to time from people not paying enough attention when things are boiling. So, checking my pot. Coming around here, there's windows. What a luxury! A drover's hut with windows. Wow! You can see all the round timbers that are used for the roof. Someone's installed a wire hook up here to dry things on. And we're back round to the door again. The door latch is neat. It's a bit of rope that comes around to the thing on this side, and that's your latch. A rope and a bit of pine. Seems to work quite well though. Now let's have a closer look at some of the artifacts that are in this hut. So there's this thing down here. That looks like a glue pot. Or maybe a bit of pipe connector or something, who knows. I might look at that later, look it up and see what it is, see if I can find out. A couple of belly cans, an axe head, oh wow, a chisel, bit of a chisel. So there's a few tools inside here. So we know that the people who made it used a chisel and an axe. That's good. There's also an old file here. Very, very rusted, but it's there. Focus. Excellent. There we go. Now, what else have we got? Bits of old hinges. There's this giant bit of metal. I have no idea where that came from. It was a great big thick bit of steel. Or iron or something. We have some evidence of past users of this hut. Ginger beer and tawny port. Someone was kindly enough to leave a thing of coffee and milk quite a while ago. And that is a more modern edition. Coming around here, we've got a old rabbit trap. Now it's illegal to use these things these days, but that's one of the really old ones with the serrated jaws on it. And quite a long time ago, back in the 60s or so, the kids who lived out this way would make quite a good living trapping rabbits. And I heard of one who was walked around, he had a donkey, and he'd walk around with all his traps and his dead rabbits hanging off the donkey, and he'd turn up and go around selling his rabbits for people to make rabbit stew and things out of. Now the documentation that's here on the wall, we've got the Mountain Hut Code, and that's something that you'll find in a lot of huts, and all the ones that are maintained by this mob, the Kosciuszko Huts Association. Group of really good volunteers, incredibly dedicated to what they do, to restoring these huts, and I'm actually a member of that organisation. So one of the things I've done through the Kosciuszko Huts Association is a lot of training in kind of what these huts, what the techniques are for making these huts. And you can see here the timber has been flattened off, and there's a couple of marks just there, and they were made by an adze. Now an adze was a kind of like an axe turned sideways on the end of a handle, and it was for people who wanted to either plane timber flat on really big scale, or often it was used in bush settings like this because it was so much lighter to carry than a broad axe. And when you have to come all the way out here, trust me, you want it to be light. Now you can see here there are some much bigger strokes that have been cut into this corner post, and I suspect they were done with a broad axe. So you've used both an adze and a broad axe to flatten off these timbers, and the fact that they've flattened off the inside of the timbers means that this hut may have at one stage had a lining and had some sort of plaster or something on the inside to keep it a bit warmer. The other thing this hut used to have, but doesn't have anymore, is evidenced by this. Now this is the original timber of the hut, about halfway down. But if we come down here, you can actually see the Huts Association has what's called a scarf. So that joint there is called a scarf, and they've scarfed in a new post because the old one would have rotted off at the base. So to preserve as much of the fabric of the building as possible, they've put in that extra bit down the bottom. Right, so that's a quick tour of Waterfall Hut. And we'll talk about some of the tools that they used when we get back around to brayshaws, because I've actually brought some down with me and I want to show you. Welcome everyone to the incredibly creepy home of the Westermans. With a door that creaks like that, I figured I should come over all Blair Witch on the whole thing and sort of... Nah, it's fine. This is the Westermans homestead, and it's a much more luxurious sort of place than Waterhole Hut, as you can see. Like, check it out. It's got a floor. That's right. They actually installed a floor in this one. It's also got lined walls, and it's got internal doors because it's got more than one room. This is a full-on homestead, and the Westermans, the family of the Westermans, would have lived here while they grazed their sheep, Possibly the cattle too, but I think it's mostly sheep around here. So here we can see Thomas Westerman. Wow, the creepy theme continues. We come around here and we can see Mary Westerman. Yep, there we go. Oops, she doesn't want to focus. It's getting more and more Blair Witch by the second. Once again we can see there's a nice fireplace here. And this one is, look, it's made of bricks. So they've actually carted a bunch of bricks in here rather than using just natural stone that was lying around. Which means that's expensive. There's also that bit of railroad track to stop everything falling out. Now, let's go into the back room. Appropriately creaky door. I'll just close that. Once again, fantastic door lock. Bit of wood, nicely done. So in the back here you can see the original lath and plaster walls. So what that is, they used split timber. Whether that was local, I suspect it wasn't, because I don't think the trees around here split particularly well. So they probably would have brought in split stakes, and then they put the lath and plaster over the top. Now, how much of that was natural earthen plaster, how much of it was lime, I don't know, but this seems to be a family that's gone to a fair bit of effort to make their home. Again, the back here you can see a few more artifacts. There's a meat cleaver and a bunch of straw in here. Now, I'd be tempted to say, oh, that was insulation. They insulated the walls with straw, but I happen to know that there's a bunch of sparrows that live here, and I reckon those sparrows have filled up the walls, which this looks like it was a display case until the sparrows went to work on it. Got another fireplace, this time made from local stone. More windows, absolute luxury. That glass would have had to have been brought in here from quite a long way away, probably Annaminibee, which is now over the border. And here we can see something off a cart. I'm going to guess they're off a sulky, but it's just a guess. Let me know if you know what they are. Look, curtains. This place actually has curtains. That's how luxurious this was. Just remember that this is the middle of nowhere. And, arachnophobes, look away. There is a family of huntsmen that live inside this wall. Which is in really good nick, actually, behind that display. Sort of protecting. There's a plastic coating over the top of it. So there we go. That's the Westerman's homestead, or the inside of it at least. This time we're going to have a look at the outside as well, because I want to show you, this door's stuck. There we go. I want to show you the outside of this place, because it was actually in a really bad state a while ago, until the Kosciuszko Huts Association got together and they remade it. So let's have a look outside. So far we've seen 4 rooms. There's actually another one, and it's just in through here. That's the woodshed. So for a country hut to have that many rooms is really, really rare. And for it to be in such good shape is very rare as well. And that's because this place was actually restored. So here you can see the stone chimneys. And there's 2 of those. There's 2 fireplaces we saw inside. And continuing around the side here, there's that stone extension from that chimney. And you can see the walls have been painted this red colour, which I believe was the original colour. There's a back door with the mandatory horseshoe for luck. And we continue around. So this place was in a bit of a sorry state, but it's been restored quite nicely to how it would have been. And even though it still needs a bit of a repaint, it's really, really harsh conditions out here. And have a look up. Remember at Waterhole Hut, they extended the roof timbers out. Here you can see they've gone one step further, and they've actually got scalloped decoration around the edge of the roof there. So it's really good to see that heritage like this is being restored and it's being kept, because it's fairly minimal impact on the environment, it being here. It provides something for people to come and see. It's a tourist attraction, and it's also shelter in bad weather. Now, it's the middle of June. It's cold. It's really cold. I was riding past frost on the way to get here. So at night, this place would be a really welcome refuge for anyone who wants to come and do this track overnight, which I can highly recommend. Do it over summer, and it's a really good first overnight walk. Okay, on to Brayshaw's homestead. We are at Brayshaw's homestead. Now this is a really interesting building because this one is halfway between Waterhole Hut, which we saw before, which was super basic, had no floor, had just tin walls, tin roof. This one is more upmarket than that. It's a homestead, but it's not like Westerman's. Westerman's being painted, and I think it's a much later built building. That was Westerman's is 1920s, 1930s. This is 1903. So let's have a look. Start off by looking up. Now this is particularly interesting because those are shingles. This has got a shingled roof underneath a tin roof. Come on, focus. Very dark in here, so we would trouble. There we go. So yeah, this has got shingles up on the roof, and then they've put tin over the top to protect them. Now the walls on this one are lined, but they're not lath and plaster like the other ones. These are actually pine boards, and you can see the little join between the boards there. They actually look a lot later than 1903, but not particularly my area of expertise. So I've got some thinner ones and some wider ones. Now the timbers in this are still cut bush timbers. We're not looking at sawn timber. These are still hand cut bush timbers. They're mostly round. There's a couple of sawn timbers here. There's actually a bit of pine up on that roof beam. So that's interesting. Now it looks like over here that at one stage the roof was lined, which would make sense actually being a shingled roof. So it looks like the roof was lined as well as the walls. Now because this is a homestead more than just a hut, it's got another room, 2 rooms. Again, not as many as the 4 that Westerman's had, 5 if you count the woodshed. But this one is really interesting because this one isn't lined. And you can see here what the walls are made of. They're made of great big slabs of timber. And as I pan around to this one, you can see all the individual bits of timber. Now the slabs were the bits you took off the outside of a log before you took the centre of it to saw into better timber. So slabs were cheap, they were offcuts. And a lot of buildings got made of those up in the mountains because timber was a big industry up there. So we've got a split shingled roof, and we've got a vertical slab wall. So this is as archetypal as you get in terms of bush huts. But it's got windows, which is nice. Quite a few of them have windows. Now the walls here are lined with newspaper. And if I can get this one in, here you can see, what are we offering here? 4-valve radios for £15. I don't know if that was a good deal or not. But you can see they've used newspapers to line the walls. And again, this is fairly typical of old buildings. They didn't have a lot of money out here, and resources were pretty hard to get anyway. So they lined the walls with newspaper. Here's the bottom half of some people. Now, a really interesting case is up in Kosciuszko. There is a hut called O'Keefe's. And O'Keefe's actually burnt down in the 2003 fires, but it was rebuilt from the ground up because it was really important as a survival shelter out there. And the person who was the caretaker of it, Jack, what's his last name? It'll come to me. I'll put it in the subtitles. So Jack actually had some 1940s newspapers, or 1930-ish newspapers. And he relined this new reconstruction of O'Keefe's hut with 1930s newspapers. And it's incredible because you can look in there and you can see the worrying rise of Hitler in Europe plastered on the wall, along with Sir Hubert Opperman's new 3-speed gears allowed him to beat the 24-hour record. All these sort of amazing events from history are on the wall. So anyway, this is the inside of Brayshaw's. Let's go out and have a look at the outside. Ugh, door's a bit sticky. Okay. Ooh, it's a little bit bright out here. Also the floor's not particularly even. Now, the outside of Brayshaw's, here you can really see those timber slabs all the way up and down. So they're vertical slabs. There are some horizontal slab buildings. I think Wheeler's hut up in Kosciuszko is horizontal slabs, but mostly they were vertical because you could get them in about the right length. So people thought, well, let's make them vertical walls. There's no point making our lives harder than they need to be. And at the end here you can see they've used some infill underneath that window. So I wonder if that was all slabs at one point. Who knows? Well, probably the people who used to live here know that. Okay, ooh, that is very bright. That's better. Now, coming at the back here, you can see that Brayshaw's has verandas front and back. And that's just a really cheap way of adding living space to a building like this, because even though we're in the middle of winter, it's not particularly cold. It's t-shirt weather. So that's kind of nice. It does get very cold overnight, -6, -8, and I imagine 100 years ago it was a lot colder. The world's warmed up a lot in the last 100 years. So there may have been snow here occasionally in winter. In fact, it still does snow here occasionally in winter. But they would have just cranked the fire up and stayed warm. So there we go. There's Brayshaw's homestead. And you can see this one from the road. So if you're ever coming down to Anaminabie and you feel like a bit of an adventure, take the Boobian Road south from Thawa and you'll see this beauty right next to the road. If you're wondering, the car park is there. So we're really not far away. So that's the travel bit. But I did say at Waterhole that I'd show you some of the tools that they used to build these huts. And I brought some along with me to show you. To build one of these buildings, you will have needed a few things. An axe, generally a full-size felling axe like that one. A saw. This one is a one-man crosscut. There are 2-man crosscuts. Just depends which one they would have had and how many people they had. 2-man is so much faster than a 1-man. And finally, to flatten off those panels, I talked earlier about using an adze. Well, this is an adze. So as you can see, it's got a curve under here, and it's used kind of like that. Not quite like golf, but more like croquet. So you come back and cut that way. There's a few other techniques for using an adze, but you have to remember that whenever you are using one, if you do pick one up, you're dealing with a very, very sharp blade, and you're swinging it towards your legs. So they're a tricky tool to use, and they can be a really dangerous tool to use, but they do give a really good finish on timber. And as we saw on the inside of Waterhole Hut, there's a really nice smooth cut timber on the inside there, even though they haven't then lined it with anything. So there's some of the really basic tools that you'd use to build one of these huts. They would have used more. We found a chisel, waterhole, and a file, so they probably would have used those to build the hut. There's also that big disc of metal, and I suspect that was used probably for straightening nails, because if you'd bothered carting a nail all the way out there, you weren't going to throw it away if you bent it, you'd straighten it again. I hope you've enjoyed the Tinker's tour of the Settler's Track. I'm Tony the Tinker, catch you later.